Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're going to get back out on the road with our Maryland Crab Cake Tour. All of our Crab Cake Row and charity and community pieces are now platformed at Baltimore Positive. Pick one of them, do something nice before baseball season starts. It's all brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. 10 times the cash. I'll be giving these away. We're going to be doing some Fridays at Fadley's before Orioles games now that we're under new ownership, which is a beautiful thing around here. Also, our friends at Window Nation, as well as Jiffy Lube Multicare, putting us out on the road. I've waited a long time to do this piece, and there's a whole background in all of this, and y'all know my love of rock and roll, and I can let my hair out, and we'll do all that later on in the segment. But this is a band I've loved forever, and I've never interviewed this person, although he did give me a bottle of Screech from Newfoundland when I was about 17 years old as a music critic down at the Baltimore Arena. I was at the Towson Center the night that the MTV cameras rolled in. Saxon had become one of my favorite bands because I had seen a band called Rush at the Capitol Center, and there was a band called Triumph, and when we were playing Pac-Man and video games at the arcade, Magic Power would come on and Hold On and Lay It on the Line, and it kind of all came back to me about 6 months ago. Jamming around, and I saw the documentary, and I loved the band, and I only caught the back end and had to tape the front end and watched it all. And then I thought, Rik Emmett used to come here all the time to Ram's Head and play, and he's written a book, and maybe I could fish out to his Canadian publicist, and he would spend some time with me. Rik Emmett, it is a pleasure to have you on to promote Lay It on the Line, a backstage pass to Rockstar Adventure, Conflict, and Triumph. I think you had all of that. Congratulations on ringing the bell and surviving and doing all these things. I've waited a long time. I've talked to your bandmates, but it's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you, Nestor. It's nice to get to chat with you too. And I want to compliment you on that beautiful orange shirt and your Orioles team. They finally sort of rounded into shape. Took a while, but you guys waited patiently, and now you got a real contender there. And that's my kind of ball team. I really do like that baseball team.
You know what, man? I put baseball as the last thing we're going to discuss, and and you've already brought it up. Let's start with this, because I'll get to the Towson Center and all this stuff that I have around here and fun toys and certainly your book and the deep thoughts in your book about your band and your life and your family. But the baseball thing in Canada, I mean, I've had Getty on many times over many years. Haven't had him on recently since the book came out. I was up at Massey Hall when he and Alex Lifeson did their thing just before the holidays. I'm fascinated by the Canadian love of baseball, especially with older folks like yourself that when you were a kid, you didn't have the Blue Jays, right? So the Blue Jays sort of came along, but I don't know how a 12-year-old kid in Etobicoke or, Mississauga would be a baseball fan in 1969 or 70. Can you explain that to me on behalf of all your Canadian rock stars who love baseball?
Yeah, well, I can tell you that the Canadians we actually have the longest running baseball diamond in North America is in London, Ontario, here in Canada. And we had baseball even before your sort of American development of the game. It was a real baseball diamond. And I have a funny story about that. Well, it's not funny, but my son played on that field. And at the time it was the Labatt's Memorial, something, when he played on it. But he played on it several times in Canadian championships and stuff. And the last time that he played there, my brother had passed away, and I had some of his ashes. And he had asked me, my brother, can you make sure that my ashes get put on in Memorial Stadium in Baltimore, because he was a huge Cal Ripken fan, right? And I went, I don't think I can swing that. But I was able to get my son to put some of his ashes just out behind second base on the oldest baseball diamond in all of North America. So that's the kind of roots that
Dying brother asked you to spread his ashes on 33rd Street at Memorial Stadium, where I spent my child. That's true. And you didn't do it?
I couldn't get. How can you get in there? Like, how could I get in to do it?
Rick, I can make this happen. I had the leader of the Y, John Hoey, on last week talking about community, talking about 33rd Street. That land there, as my last name's Aparicio, so I came to this world and this country. My cousin came as a shortstop and left
Right.
my father here, and I'm the last one here, right? So I had
Right
John
on.
Hoey on last week, and the Y, the former YMCA, the Y took the land there 20 years ago, and I admitted to John I could not drive down 33rd Street for about 15 years of my life because it upset me so much that it was gone. And
Yeah.
I can make this happen for you, brother. So we're all friends here. This is
Okay.
I can make this Canadian U.S. baseball thing, and Cal's going to be an owner of the baseball team now, and you
I
still love
know.
baseball. All you guys do. I mean, when I'm
Yeah.
in Canada, you love hockey, but boy, if the Blue Jays ever won a World Series again, right?
Yeah. I think the Canadian thing was that, obviously hockey was 6 months of the year, but then what do you do the next six? And like, you know, so it was like most athletes, you played ball in the summer and you played hockey in the winter. That's how it worked.
Well,
So,
you've got a lot of baseball pictures in here, and I didn't know of your affinity of baseball. I mean, Getty's kind of out there with it, and other Canadian people are out there with it, but I didn't know that you were looking for a ball game when you were on tour with the band 40 years
oh
ago.
man, like when I was when I was about 8 or 9 years old, we used to start to have pitchers. It was softball pitching, but we used to have pitchers and catchers in spring training, kind of in the basement of my school in March. And so every year around this time, I get this itchy kind of, yeah, spring training. Pitchers and catchers have already reported. Oh, like it's a part of who I am. My dad played ball. My brother played ball. Yeah, it was a thing. Like we had a men's slow pitch team, and we played in a league. And my dad coached third, and my brother and I played together. And yeah, I mean, I just, it's always been a part of who I am, just as much as music almost. I guess if I'd had more chops as a baseball player, I might have ended up doing that. But yeah, one thing led to another. I ended up in the music business. So there you go.
All right. Well, we got Rik Emmett here from Triumph. The book is Lay It on the Line. So I guess I come at this pretty honest. Back in September, I put a Facebook status up and just said, what's the greatest song ever written? What's like to my world? And hundreds of things came onto the Facebook page, and someone said Magic Power. And obviously I know this song. I used to sing it with Gary Sest at Dundalk High on the guitar. We had a good time. I had that vocal range back in the day. uh,
Nice.
Not your range, bro, but it was a fun one to try, because if you could sing that, you could sing anything. You could sing the phone book if you could sing Magic Power. So I literally put a set list together one morning, and I was showering 4 a.m, away from my wife, cranking up music in the bathroom as we all do. And I listened to your song and I thought, wow, like I'll vote that's on the list. I don't know. And then I guess the world, because you pop up on Facebook, and if I say your name, now everything that comes on YouTube the next 6 months is going to be a video of you at the Towson Center or whatever. But the movie that was made and the documentary came to me by accident. It was just a Saturday afternoon. I popped on Axis and I started watching it. And I guess 6 months later, I found you, and here we are, and you wrote a book. But the story of your band, for me, even as a fan of your band, and I have ticket stubs I'll show you from back in the day, and loving your band, I don't know that you just disappeared, like in a way that, and then you started showing up at Ram's Head with an acoustic guitar, and lots of my friends went down to see you play. I'm such an idiot for never coming down and seeing you do that, although I play around on YouTube and watch your acoustic versions of that. But that the end of your band was a mystery to a lot of fans, especially maybe not in Toronto, but outside of that, it's like, what happened? And I think 40 years later in your book, you try to paint a picture of all that. But the movie also, and the reunion you guys did at Metalworks a number of years ago now, sort of put a little bit of a bow on that for fans to finally let them in a little bit, because I don't know that it was popular knowledge about how uncomfortable the band was to be in.
Yeah, I mean, it's ancient history, but when we lived it, it didn't feel like it was some sort of strange vanishing, disappearing act at the time. It just felt like, well, this is the natural course of events. And I think in order to frame it properly, for your viewers here, you have to understand that, Triumph was a band that we'd done very well in terms of album radio. And we were an album kind of act. And so the rise of a world where, Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and these people were making album rock, and then radio in the States gravitated towards it. we came in, but we were only a band that was like, we were on RCA originally, which was, I think, the sixth of the seven major labels. And then we fought them in a lawsuit, and then we ended up at MCA, which was the, it turned into Universal, which ended up taking over the whole world. But at the time, MCA was like, I mean, Elton John was signed to them, and he called it the music cemetery of America. It was, they didn't have a lot of clout in the whole music business per se. So
Skinner pooped on him, right? Wrote a song working for the MCA, literally, right?
Yeah. Yes. So there was that thing of we were never playing in that league where Styx was going 6 or 7 times platinum, and Journey was going 8 or 9 or 10 times platinum, and even Rush all over the world is selling quadruple platinum, whatever. Like, we would struggle to kind of go gold, and then if we hung around long enough and worked really hard and toured along, okay, we could maybe get to platinum, but which we did with MCA a couple of times. But it was, so we were on the radar, but we weren't like, pushing boundaries and making amazing things happen. And then the band had gotten to the point where, well, as I said in the book, it was just, it had run its course for me, and I wanted to do other things. I mean, we started our conversation here talking about baseball. My life was always one of having a kind of an eclectic approach, as I just wrote, I'm working on a new book, which is about playing the Telecaster guitar, and it's where I started and where I've come back to. And it's called 10 Telecaster Tales. And one of the things they talk about is this eclectic journey, of always wanting to do something where in Triumph, I would be the guy that would put on these guitar pieces, and it would give the band a kind of a very thin veneer of being a progressive act. We weren't really a progressive act, I was writing pop songs that I was trying to get on album radio, and Mike and Gil both, I think they felt like they just wanted to have a heavy band. They wanted to have a band like, Metallica or I mean, when we played the US Festival, there was like Motley Crue and Scorpions, and I think Gil and Mike were going, yeah, this is the kind of band, they wanted Triumph to be. But the songs that I wrote, like Magic Power you were talking about, it's not really a heavy metal kind of a song. It's about something else. It's about what radio did for me when I was a kid, and what radio does. Oh, here's a big thing about that tune. The lyric I wrote, it talks about she climbs into bed and she pulls the covers over her head. So there's a she in the song. And we started to get women finally buying tickets and coming to see our shows, to which Mike and Gil were like, astounded. And I was going, no, who do you think listens to radio most of the time? It's not just guys in the warehouse. It's women they're around the house, and they're doing their housekeeping, and they're looking after the kids, and they got the radio going. And so this song is a song that speaks to everybody. It doesn't just speak to, guys in black t-shirts, Anyhow, so that was that sowed the kinds of divisions that were within the band. And eventually that's the kind of stuff that breaks it apart,
Rik Emmett is here from Triumph. The book is laid on the line. You love the music in the band, get the story behind it. I dove into the band side of this right before we spoke to just get fresh on the power struggle, which was very obvious from the movie and the film, and just clearly 3 very different human beings. I mean, I think I'm 55 now, and I think about my 2 or 3 best friends in 1984 and whether I could be in a business with them and whether it would have grown in the same direction with families, and which is really a tribute to Rush and U2 and the handful of bands that have managed to keep members together for a lifetime. I think it's difficult to do, but you were self-managed, and I think very clear from Gil and his family and the business side. And I used to interview Mike all the time because he was the spokesperson. And when the music critic at the Baltimore Sun would call in 1989, we'd get Mike. And I think the business side of that and being self-managed, and I'm fiercely independent. I think it's part of a Canadian tradition of being fiercely independent, that maybe that didn't serve you as well either, in that Irving Azoff came in later on, but the notion that it was you against the world, that probably was a really difficult in any era to do. Pearl Jam's tried it and fought the man and like all that, but that's a very difficult thing, because I'm that guy that's fought with the baseball team here for 30 years. It's very difficult to push against the wind, and you guys were fundamentally like that, managed like that by Gil and your partnership, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was an independent-minded kind of operation for sure. And I've said this in the memoir. You know, when I hooked up with Gil and Mike, I found them to be two of the smartest musicians that I'd ever encountered. Um, and in the end, they didn't really think like musicians. You know, Gil thought more like a business operating kind of guy, and was very good with money, accounting and bookkeeping and all of those kinds of things. His dad had been in that end of the business, and Mike was very much marketing and promotion, and so those skills for a band, those are really important, and they can do a lot of good for a band, especially as from its inception as it grows. You get to a certain point in this business though, and I say this business as if I'm still really in it. You know, but you rise to a certain point, you have to have champions, you know, like as you've met with frustrations there in Baltimore about team ownership, and now you know, oh, you think you're going to get over the top now because you got some new ownership happening. Like, there is a top-down thing that happens. You need champions in higher positions to make things happen. Like in the years when Triumph did have a lot of success, it was because Mike really knew how to get the promotion divisions of record companies to do their job, and to you know, to go to bat for you, and go to the wall for you, you know, get record companies to spend that extra promotion marketing budget, you know, make the act be a priority. And you have to have that. You need to have a record company president that believes in you, you know. Now, in the case of Irving, I think he did believe in the band, you know, on a certain way, but Irving was a guy that he functioned at so many levels. I mean, did you see that in the news recently? He's got some sort of a thing now, and he's buying up. He bought Rod Stewart's catalog of masters and publishing, and it's like, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars. And Irving was always a guy that could play at a game that was just so far above where we were at, because he was running MCA Records, but he was still managing the Eagles. He'd be still, you know, he probably
It would
had
be a full-time job for most people, just doing the Eagles, right?
Exactly.
And there were no personalities in that band or anything.
No, that's exactly it. Yeah. So anyhow, I mean, that's the story of so many bands. You rise to a certain point, and it's like that Peter Principle thing, where eventually it's going to come apart because you're reaching your level of this is as far as you can go before it, you know, the cracks are going to start to show. And some bands, you know, they manage, like as you mentioned, Rush and U2. I do think that there's a vision from within the band. You talked about independent mindedness, and I do think that in the case of, say, U2, you've got a couple of principles in there, you know, Bono and the Edge, and they have this partnership where they go, look, no matter what happens, this is how we're going to try to make our business work. And I think Keith Richards and Mick Jagger, same kind of a thing. You know, they go, okay, if we go off on our own and do our own things, that's fine. But there is this thing that we do together, and it's going to be this band. And I think Rush had that, you know, for sure. So, you know, I mean, I think Led Zeppelin had that. And then when Bonham passed away, it was kind of like, you know what, we're not going to touch this sacred thing that we kind of had. And I think Zeppelin might have been one of the first bands that went, no, we're going to have our own label. We're going to have Swan Song, and we're only going to lease the masters to the major label. We're not going to sign the conventional record contract where the record company's going to own the masters, you know. And once they did that, then everybody went, oh, that's how you play the game. Oh, okay. I thought only the Beatles could get away with that, you know. But then everybody went, no, once you rise to a certain point, that's the way you play it.
That's how you want to negotiate it anyway. Rik Emmett is here. The book is laid on the line. Why the book? I mean, you had done poetry. You've been teaching. I mean, and I would say prolific writer. I mean, just blogging and just in general, once a writer, always a writer. And I'm guilty as well, where like the only way you can sort of make sense of things and organize things in your mind is to write it down and get it out. But this has been a long time coming, right? For you to write a memoir, and it's it's really a book of observations more than anything else, as it goes along, sort of stream of consciousness, but observations and sort of the perspective of how you feel about it 30 years later.
Yeah, I mean, you do a memoir, you kind of have this thing where I'm thinking in the back of my mind, well, I only want to do this once. Like I'm not going to do a series of memoirs. I'm only going to do it once. And so I kind of want to get it right. But the fact that I waited such a long time, part of it was because I was always prioritizing. Like, well, as you mentioned, my life it was complicated. I did a lot of things. My family was important to me, and there was all of that. We had 4 kids, and the music was always then the next thing. So I had family, and then I had music, and then I went, well, yeah, I want to write. Well, I'll do that later. I'm going to focus on these. I was still touring a lot and playing gigs like out every weekend. You talked about the Rams Head. Like I loved coming down and playing that gig. That was a really cool little place to get to play. It was civilized. And then me and another guitar player would just get up there, and I could be so self-indulgent, tell stories and play guitar pieces and do cover songs if I wanted. And I would tour around and do that on weekends. So I kept doing that because it was there for me. And I thought, I'll write the memoir, later. One of the big catalysts for writing the memoir was that Triumph did the documentary. And then after it, I went, well, that's Triumph's story, but it's not really mine. My story is going to be more complex than that. Mine's going to talk about what I did after I left them. I made more records after I left the band than I did when I was in it. I had a very lengthy, independent kind of career as an indie artist. And I taught, you mentioned that, the school thing. So I had other priorities. I was like, well, okay, now when I write the memoir, I'm going to have to cover all of these other things. Man, and I don't want to write a memoir that's, 550 pages long. Like, I was able to make the deal with ECW by going, look, please publish this book of poetry. I know, nobody sells books of poetry. I know there's no money to be made, but I promise you, I'll give you a memoir too. And they went, oh, a memoir too. Okay, so let's do a 2-book deal. I go, okay, great. So I knew that the memoir was now on the horizon, and I would have to organize my thinking in order to get it done. But as you say, it bounces around. There's stuff there that you can clearly tell, well, he was a college teacher for 20 years. I'm getting a lot of syllabus here. I've had some friends go, Rik, you sure like, 3 and 4 and 5 syllable words. I got to get the dictionary out to reread in your book. And I go, well, I'm an academic. I'm more of an academic and a philosopher than I am really a rock star. So.
Well, I think that's apparent, right? And I think all these years later that, and I should ask you this, and I maybe I didn't get far enough in the book to figure all this out, but to hear you say it, you were really unhappy in a band and as an artist, and the debt service and the business side of busting up with lawyers and the fighting that went on behind the scenes just to get the band heard. But the indie life for you, once you got out and sorted it out, you've had obviously challenges, your brother passing and other things that you've written about, but was it a happier life being independent and doing all of those albums on your own, even though it wasn't big stages and big money and big travel and all of that? Did you live a happier life because of finally, and it took you years to say, I don't want to be on the front of a 3-man band anymore?
Yes. Yeah, the short answer to your question is yes. And a longer answer is this. I was listening to Smartless the other day, and they were talking to Lars Ulrich of Metallica. And he was talking about, when you have success in a band, you have this thing that's going to just eat up all your time. And they would have band meetings, and they'd be sitting around and going, okay, well, I realize you'd like to block out this Memorial Day weekend because it's your kid's birthday, but, we have to go and play this gig in, wherever, and it becomes this thing as people get older and they have their own families and they have their own lives inside a band. It's something you don't want to have to compromise about, because you're becoming more of an adult. It's not like you're, these sort of overgrown teenagers that went, we put a band together and we're making money and this is great. It's great success. And, in Lars' case, he's going, all we ever were thinking about was playing the gigs and then getting high, getting hammered. Like that was really, those were the priorities, and then, but life it works the way that it works. Now, I was always somebody that I was interested in sports, and I was interested in reading, and I was interested in teaching and writing. Like, one of the great things that happened to me when Triumph first started to become successful was Guitar Player magazine said, hey, you want to write a column for us? So every month I had to come up with a column. It's not a crazy, huge thing, responsibility and time consuming kind of thing. But in my case, I go, well, I want to write one that'll be a really good column. And I want to make sure that, and then I got into it 3 years later. They're sending me, Tom Wheeler would send me a little note and say, Rik, I just want you to know, when we do surveys, your column is always the favorite of readers' column. And so the fact that I was conscientious about it, it made it so that it had a value that extended beyond the fact that I was just, my name was there on a masthead, once a month. But it also made it so that, oh, Rik Emmett, oh, the guy from Triumph, oh, wait, the guy that writes for Guitar Player magazine, right? And so like Yamaha goes, hey, would you like to have an endorsement deal? And we'll give you carte blanche. Like you can design your own guitars. You can see I have a fetish,
You have a collection there. Yeah. I know Getty got rid of all of his baseball stuff. And, I often wonder that they're big. I mean, if you collect baseballs, they're this big. Guitars are huge. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole storage thing you have going on there. You and Rick Nielsen.
Yeah, well, he's got it way worse than I do. And I know Alex pretty good. And Lifeson, he had a bunch. Like he had, I would say, 5 times as many as I do. I'm down to about 50 now, 55, something like that. So
Paul Reed Smith's here in Maryland, right? So he's making these guitars, and Alex and just all of you guitar geeks come in and have the master make guitars here, right?
Yes, yeah, and he is like his guitars are phenomenal. But I mean, I'm sort of old school, right? I've had endorsement deals at Yamaha, Godin. I had a Gibson relationship from about 2007 to 2012, and got some nice Les Pauls, and there's a double neck over there, and which, by the way, Lifeson calls his one the Fat Bastard, and I just call mine the chiropractor's best friend. All those years of playing those double necks, man, I was ruining my neck and my back. But man, they looked pretty good on stage, yeah.
Yeah, it looked good, man. It looked like 2 necks were better. Nielsen would get 6 or 7 going there. But Rik Emmett is here from Triumph. The book is laid on the line. So the book and putting it together, you're a writer, you're an academic, all that. Easy or hard once it came to the editing process to sort of pare down what you're trying to convey to people who love you and have loved your music? And the gal that put Magic Power up, she might not have the book and might want it. What were you trying to do in this?
I was trying to fit way too much into too small a space. So and when your first question was, is it hard? Yes, it was hard. It was really hard to do. When I first started, I've had a blog, a forum on my website for members for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And so I said to my web mistress, hey, can you put all of my posts that I've written all in one file and send it to me? And it was well over 5,000 single-spaced pages of stuff. So the editing was the hardest thing at the beginning.
So you had already written most of this. It just had never been put into one place, kind of sort of buffed up.
Man, I wouldn't say written most of this. I would say written probably a good half of it, because of course those folks that were on my forum, they're my best fans, and they would ask these questions like, hey Rik, do you remember when you played Towson and blah blah blah, do you remember this, do you remember that? And so the stories would have been there, and so I would go through and clean it out and go, okay, this is a story that has to be told, and this is the story that the Triumph documentary told, but they didn't tell my side of it. Now that was the rewriting. So there were things where I was going, okay, I don't have to tell this. This has been beat to death, but this is the side that I need to, show folks. And then there was the whole thing of, I want people to know who, Richard Gordon Emmett is, and, hopefully will be for the next, couple of decades, God willing. So there's a side of that when you're writing a memoir where you're writing it. And now, of course, I'm going around and doing all these interviews and stuff. And the book, by the way, it's doing well, that's nice. It's a great thing. And the publicist goes, "Hey, you want to keep doing interviews?" I go, "Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, we'll keep doing this." But when you're doing them, a memoir is something where you're talking about the past a lot. So, and then everybody's asking you about your past, and then you feel like you're like at your own wake, and like you go, wait, and it's the Monty Python joke, right? I'm not dead yet, like, and I'm not, that's part of it. So there's a thing that you're trying to do with a memoir where you're trying to incorporate the sort of the currency and the vitality of who you still are into this history of who you were, so that whole past, present, future thing is at play. And it's a remarkable thing from a sort of a psychological therapeutic point of view, because, you don't want to be living too much in the past. There's way too much regret there, you like to be in the present because this is the only thing you're guaranteed, the future, you go, well, I'm not guaranteed that, but I hope what I'm doing today, I hope the things that I do today, it's like, why would I want to go to spring training? Well, because that's prep for the future, and it's necessary. If you want the future to be something that you really, really want, the present has to be about the future. So writing a memoir is kind of that kind of a thing for me. I don't know if it's for everybody, but that's what it was like for me.
Well, I mean, Geddy Lee wrote this book last year and he did the tour, and I went to a couple of dates and it was kind of fun on stage, but telling these stories, and I'm thinking to myself, this is so out of I've been a Rush fan for 40 years. Just hearing Geddy and seeing him cry and get emotional. He said he was all cried out by the time he had done a dozen dates, but part of writing the book and doing these things is retelling these stories and having some clown in Towson, Maryland say, "Hey, Rik, do you remember that the Towson Center show? I'm sharing the ticket now, or what's left of it, from February 21st, 1982. There is what's left of my ticket. It had some sort of scotch tape on it. I don't know what it was." What do you remember gigs individually, or was there too much screech and too much in and out? But that night was captured. That night was captured for everyone. I had become a Saxon fan because I was a Rush fan. Your music was on the radio, 98 Rock, all that. So I wanted to see your band. But it was a cold, snowy night. I remember it's February 21st, cold as hell in that little Towson Center, which is still there. And there were video cameras like rolling. And I had never seen those kind of cameras. In 1981, 82, they brought the same stuff they brought to the summit for Journey. It is, in the midnight on Saturday night, they were going to debut Triumph at the they didn't pronounce it right, Towson Center in Maryland. What do you remember, Rik?
Well, I just remember the pressure of it because, of course, it was MTV, and that was the catalyst for it. And everybody was trying to cozy up to MTV at the time. That was now the new way to break records, and so record companies were trying to get in there. And I think Triumph might have been. I think Prince had already done a live thing for them, and I think the Triumph one was literally the second one that they ever did of live concerts, which of course it was going to turn into a standard kind of thing that they did all the time. But I don't know. I remember not just that one, but other kinds of ones where the cameras were there, or the Westwood mobile truck was there, and this was going to get recorded, and this was going to turn into live concerts on the radio. I'm thinking, okay, so you have to be good. Like you can't mess this up because this is gonna exist for posterity. So for me particularly, it was a question of don't run around too much on stage, like, because sometimes I would just go crazy and be jumping around and do but if I did, then my vocals would suffer. As the set went on, my pitch would get worse and worse. Whereas if I relaxed and took it easy and didn't go at it too hard and didn't run around too much, by the time we got to Magic Power near the end of the night, or whatever was going to be the end song, Fight the Good Fight, there was a lot of songs where I had to sing awfully high, and I needed a chance to rest before I could tackle that, because I wasn't like a singer that was just standing in the middle of the stage, doing my thing with my feet planted. I was not a Paul Rogers kind of a guy. I had a guitar and your three-piece band. Somebody's got to front that thing, and you got to move around, So I remember that. I remember telling myself, like, don't run around too much, you idiot. Like, yeah.
Did you like it? I mean, because it played a lot. Were you happy with it?
No.
I hate to hear that 40 years later. Don't break my heart, Rik.
Well, but I mean, part of that is I think there's a side of every artist where when you listen to yourself back, you go, or you see a video, or you go, ooh, I could have done that better. Oh, I could. Oh, geez, that's a little flat. Or oh, man, I look weird from that angle. Like you're self-critical in a way that even your worst critic is not going to see the things that you see about yourself or feel about yourself. And I was never the delusional kind of artist that I love listening to my old records. Oh, I love looking at pictures of me. Oh, I love watching videos of me. And I go, what kind of a problem have you got? Like, that's, I'm not interested in that. I'm more interested in what has somebody else got to offer that I might be able to then incorporate into my own process. What can I learn from? I've always felt like I was kind of a student for life. And I don't think rock stars are necessarily, well, they come in all shapes and sizes. I think a guy like David Bowie was probably a rock star that he was very much an artist, and he wasn't necessarily that concerned about looking at those pictures of him. He created those images and those videos and those things, and then he would move on to something else, because that's what he was doing, was he was searching, so the guys that are, enamored of their own videos or their own images or their own recordings, I go, I don't know, buddy. I think you got some screws loose. Like, it doesn't seem healthy to me, but who's to say what healthy is?
That's humble Canadianness as well, though, too, right? A little bit?
I think so. That modesty, yes. I mean, and I think Canadians do have it a little bit more than Americans. But, I'm not putting Americans down. The way I always describe that one is, in Canada, if you're not modest and you're not sort of practical and you don't put on your mittens or your scarf, you'll freeze to death, 6 months of the year. Whereas in Texas and Virginia and, Florida, man, you can be dead drunk lying in a gutter all night long, and you'll wake up in the morning and go, oh, geez, okay.
Don't try that on Yonge Street.
No, exactly right. So, and I think that the other thing too is Americans really have a very strong sense of, and this is national identity, that up by your own bootstraps, individuality, like I'm strong, I'm great, don't screw with my rights. Whereas Canadians go, geez, I'm sorry, can I be of service? Can I help you somehow? Like, can we cooperate? Hey, can I lend you something to help you out? Because if you didn't cooperate in Canada, again, you were going to freeze to death. So,
That's your theory. I love it.
Yeah.
Rik Emmett is here. Lay It on the Line is a book, backstage pass to rock star adventure, conflict. It has to have that to be a story, and triumph, and a great picture of what's that, Allied Forces era there? That's a young Rik Emmett on that cover, huh?
That's Just a Game. That was
Just a Game,
1979
right.
At the Ottawa Civic Center, and we were still playing sort of either sized down buildings or the largest theater in town. But that was from the Ottawa Civic Center. Yeah.
You're teaching. I'm sorry.
Sorry. It's the jumpsuit. You can tell. It's the Ackerman guitar. It still didn't have it's still got its rotary switch in the top. I hadn't switched that out yet. So it's easy for me to be able to look at a picture like that and go, oh yeah, 1979. Yeah.
It's a period piece. There's the front and then there's the back.
Yeah.
I knew you were teaching, and I'm not keeping up with every word you're writing, or any rock star, quite frankly. I love your music. I listened to Hold On this morning. I think that's my favorite, although Fight the Good Fight was my original favorite. And I think of your academic side and the teaching side of where life took you in that way when you were coming down here and playing on weekends at Ram's Head. Tell me about life as a teacher. Is that something that when you were in conflict with the band in the 80s that you thought that's something I would do? Because so many artists, Billy Joel, I'm thinking all these people that wanted to be teachers or put themselves into some sort of, even if they're doing a podcast or they're trying to educate people, but you really took it on as you were a real teacher in a real university for a long, long time, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it was in my nature. I mean, I've got 4 kids, and 3 of them are teachers. So,
Wow.
you so I think it's in the DNA. And I think there would be people that would look at my body of work, and especially those Triumph songs that you mentioned, and they would go, there's a little kind of a didactic, pedantic kind of quality to these songs that he writes. It's like he's kind of in a pulpit and he's preaching a little bit, And I think it was one of the things, honestly, that the other guys in Triumph kind of went, "Oh, geez, Rik, not another one of these," like
Telling people how to live
motivational,
their life, right?
inspirational.
Literally, right? Yeah.
Well, the thing was, like, when I joined the band, they'd already picked out this name. It was already called Triumph, and they had all of this promotional material that it had nothing to do with a band that was called Triumph. It would show devil's heads and fire, and I'm going, "What is this?" And they go, "Well, there was another band called Hellfire, and we just decided to use that imagery." And I go, "But you're calling the band Triumph." And it took me a while, but you mentioned the song "Hold On." I think that was when I sort of figured out, hey, you can marry the music to the name, to what it is that you do up on stage, where the band was kind of be going like, hey, instead of going, hey, let's party like it's, like there's no tomorrow. Let's have that sex and drugs and rock and roll thing. And I think Gil kind of felt like that's the kind of band he might have wanted to have, like a band that had songs like Kiss, And I was going, no, it's called Triumph. And these folks that are out in the seats, they're in high school and they're struggling. They're having a hard time. They're trying to find their own identities, and let's offer them something which helps them to feel good about themselves. So songs like Magic Power and Hold On and Fight the Good Fight, and I could go on, but I would only be going into the B cuts and the C cuts.
Well, somebody's out there, from a hit standpoint, to say there's hope. There's an aspirational part to almost everything you've ever written. And I think 40 years later, the grown-up version of Rik, it's amazing to me at 22, for anyone like you who was gifted enough to write something that 40 years later I listen to and say, man, I didn't even understand what they were writing about when I was 15 and singing the words. But this is some deep shit.
Yeah.
And for a 21-year-old to write that and still be singing it 40 years later, and for it to be aspirational and hope, that lasts a lifetime. That is universal, right?
And that was the kind of stuff that I was reaching for. And so back to your question about being a teacher, I think that's what motivates teachers. They're trying to help other people find the best parts of themselves and take advantage of those things, like work on them and work them up and work them out. And so there's like that work ethic kind of thing is in there, and yeah, I mean, like, it's not like you want to be banging people over the head with it. And you do want to offer people recreation in the true sense of the word, that they recreate themselves through the work because they find something of a value in it that makes them feel better and feel good about life, So I was always pushing for that. That's a very teacherly kind of thing. And then once I got in there and I was doing it, I think I'm probably going to sound like every other teacher that's talking about after they've retired. Like, there are kids that are there that they're going to burn you out. Like, they're, and I would say to them sometimes, like, you've paid money to be in this course. Well, like, why are you not doing the work that, is required? And they're going, well, I'm not sure that I want to be here. I go, well, I don't get that. I honestly, I don't understand. And there would be other students that they would make your day. They would make your life. You would have, and I'll tell you a quick little story, because anecdotes are the best way to do these things, especially in these podcasts.
Well,
So
I love long form. I used to take phone calls for a living. No, 2-minute
okay.
songs. Teach
right.
me something, Rik Emmett.
Okay. So I got a guy in my class, and he's a guitar player, and he's not a very good one in the cohort. Like, if there's, say, 40, not even, there's probably only about 20 guitar players left by the time they get to third year, fourth year. And he's probably, number 18 on the list, right? And he knows it. and I know it. And they're supposed to be doing marketing plans, business plans for me as part of the music business course that I'm teaching. This was early on in my teaching thing. So he says to me, look, Rik, I want to talk to you about my marketing plan. He goes, this guitar, I don't know what to do, and I don't think guitar is the thing. I go, well, I don't want to sound nasty or cruel, but I agree with you. So what do you think? And he goes, well, I've been going out to the park on the weekends, and I've been practicing bagpipes. And I go, bagpipes, you say? And he goes, yeah. He goes, it's a horrible racket, and I'm not great at it, but I'm getting better at it. And he goes, but I'm thinking I might want to do a business plan about, playing bagpipes for a living. And I go, okay, tell me more. Let's extrapolate this. Let me hear what you're thinking about. He goes, well, here in Canada, there's a lot of Scottish Presbyterian churches, and they have funerals and they have weddings, and they would need bagpipe players. And he goes, so I'm thinking I'd do a mailing list, and I would do the Presbyterian churches. I go, well, that's very good. That's solid. He goes, okay. I was at a hockey banquet, a month ago, and they had a bagpiper guy bagpipe in the front table, all the guests and stuff. And he goes, so I'm thinking, I could do that, special events of a Scottish nature, or, I go, all right, this is sounding solid to me. This is a good idea. And you're thinking along the right lines. So go ahead, do your business plan. So he does the business plan. And in the end, it's good. It's really solid. Like, whether or not he's going to be a bagpipe guy, this marketing plan, this business plan, it's a smart one. He's figured out about, and if I get a bank loan of this amount and I'm earning this kind of money, I'll be able to pay the bank back, blah, 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 just all the shit. So years go by, and I get an email one day, and it's from this guy. And he goes, Rik, I don't know if you remember me, blah, 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 I was in your class, and then I did my business plan about bagpipe. He goes, look, I'm not a bagpiper. He goes, I ended up, he said, I just took what you taught me about how to think, and I put together a business plan. He goes, I now run 3 bush planes and 2 helicopters in and out of the Northwest Territories and the Yukon, and I do medical supplies, and I do blah, 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 and he goes, and, I got a really great business, and I have you to thank for it because you taught me. And I go, okay. Could a teacher ever hope for anything better than an email like that? It's like, you made my day, you made my week, you made my year. And it only takes one. Like, you can have 50 failures, but if you have the one win, you go, I'll take it. Thank you very much.
So when I walk up to you and say, I love your song, it's meant so much to me, Fight the Good Fight got me through tough times in my life, like, that doesn't weigh as much as teaching to some degree. That adulation that you always felt from girls, from boys, from, I've got your autograph on an album that you drew in silver and did a guitar neck, and I thought, this is an artistic guy, this Rik Emmett fellow. But there is something about the pragmatic part of changing someone's life in that way as a teacher. Maybe it means more to you than a song.
Yeah, you mentioned adulation. Like, I never did it because I was wanting to, I shouldn't say that. Of course, everybody wants to get somebody else's approval, and, oh, they like me. Oh, that's great. But I was doing it because I was interested in the process. I was interested in doing this creative thing that would then have some sort of benefit or value in the final analysis, that other folks would go, yeah, this isn't just a great piece of music. This is a great piece of music that made me think, or this is a great piece of music that helped me understand how to feel about certain things, or like, it was always, I didn't want just the music. I wanted some sort of substance, some sort of an integrity that existed in what it was that I was doing. And, you've mentioned these bands that have lasted, and you mentioned U2 and Rush. And I think both of those acts are acts that went, no, there's an integrity that we do here. That's what we do. There's something substantial that we must offer that goes beyond the shallow kind of, hey, you bought a ticket, I'm going to show you a good time for the next hour and a half. Like, yes, there's that. There's no question that that's part of it. But it's like, what will you take away? And I used to tell this to my students all the time. Offer people something that money can't buy. That's what you offer people in the work that you do. Something that money can't buy, which of course, that's the MasterCard, oh, this is priceless. Yeah, but that's the truth of it. Like, if you really want to do something that's going to matter and that's going to have value that lasts, you gotta build it in there.
Spoken like the man who wrote "Music holds the secret to know it can make you whole." So, last couple things for you, because our time is short. You've
Wait,
been incredibly
before
generous.
you move on,
Go ahead.
because what you just said was a poem that I wrote in grade 12. That was in high school. That lyric, music holds a secret to know it can make you whole. It's not just a game of notes. It's the sounds inside your soul. That was a poem that I wrote in high school. So, I'm not exactly a 23-year-old Joni Mitchell writing both sides now, but I did have a poem that ended up as a pretty decent lyric.
But how does an 18-year-old write, "I sing this song for the common man, for the people in despair"? What did you know about the people in despair, except it was cold outside in Toronto?
That part came later. I didn't write that. Those were written as a guy in 1978 or 79 in a band, thinking about being on a stage and going, what do I want to say to those people that are in the seats, that are climbing up on the seats when we blow up the flash pots and are standing on their the next hour? I go, what do I want to say to them? And I go, well, I write this song for the common man, for the people in despair. Like, if you're feeling bad, I can make you feel better. I'll offer you something that can make you feel better. And that's building towards a song that's going to go, floor on the floor disco. It's going to be hold on to your dreams. Like, it's going to feel good. That's where it's headed.
Well, it's this has been a lot of fun. I am indebted. You talk about things this has been priceless. I couldn't buy a cameo with you that lasted this long. I'm glad you wrote this book, Rik. Two last things. The touring, and that he's ended his touring and like that. What do you think about that? Is there 6 weeks in a summer where you would want to come down and just hang out and play at Ramshead and do a couple of those things for fun, because it would be fun for you and not, shit, I'm on the road again, I'm in a hotel again? I mean, is there any point where we'll get to see you play? That's a pretty common question, right?
Yeah, and I am a guy that wrote a song that said "Never Say Never," and I do find it dangerous to take a really big paintbrush and paint in broad strokes. But I should tell you, I've been struggling with some arthritis in my hands, and that's changing things. I don't know how much it will, and as you alluded to earlier, I've gone through a sort of a cancer treatment. Now I'm sort of trying to deal with this advent of rheumatoid arthritis. And I don't know how much it's going to, knock a hole in my ability to. So certainly going out on the road and traveling, and, you just said about, hotels and airports, and that does seem like a grind to me. And I got to admit, my wife has been patiently sitting around for decades waiting for, hey, she's going to go to on a safari. She's going to like Kenya and Nairobi, and like she's going to do this year. Like, I'm not going with her. Like, that's not my idea. That's not my idea of fun. I go,
you'll be at Sky Dome at a ball game when Rogers, when the Orioles are in town, right? Literally.
And I would like to be in a luxury box.
Baseball. Let's end with baseball here. And you still follow? Is still as big as maybe you ever were?
My news feed is full of, like, I get all the Guitar World stuff and blah blah blah, and then I get all the baseball stuff. So yes, I remain hip to the fact that pitchers and catchers reported a couple of days ago. Position players are there now. Like, yeah, I mean, and I've gone to spring training a couple of times. Like, we went and saw a game once, a Cubs game in they're over in Arizona. But and of course my son played at a collegiate level. He was NCAA Division I, and so they would go and have spring training down in Florida, and I would go see him play sometimes. He's now in his 30s, and he's got a baby on the way, and he doesn't play baseball that much anymore. He still coaches. That's one of the things. He's the one that's not a teacher, but he's still a coach. So
do
that's
you
kind of
play
part
at
of it.
all? Do you? I mean, if do you pick up a guitar and play sometimes in a podcast like this, or just play and play Triumph stuff for fans once a year? I mean, when's the last time you picked up a guitar and played any of these songs you've been talking about? Because you don't have an audience for it, right?
Oh no, I played guitar for about 2 hours yesterday, 2.5 hours.
Oh,
Like
okay.
I play guitar every day. And if I don't, it's both mentally and physically therapeutic. Like I really should, because if I don't, I start to get grumpy and feel bad and yeah. So no, I play, and I just had this guitar made for me. Like this is the one that so I was talking about the new album 10. I had it's a Telecaster, but it's got a Les Paul's scale length and pickups and string height, and this only weighs about 6.5 pounds. So this is incredibly light and easy to play. So yeah, I'm still into it. And the answer to your question about gigs and public appearances, like I will go out and get interviewed. I'm doing one in April in Brampton, Ontario, where a guy interviews me, and I got a guitar there, and I'll play a few little things. I might not play, a full song. I might play just 6, but I might play one or two, and I would play "Lay It on the Line" or "Magic Power." And I was over in Sweden on New Year's because I had some friends, blah 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 blah, playing in a band in a junior world hockey championships, and it was like, hey Rick, come on over and sing, and we'll do some Triumph songs. We'll do 2 or 3. So I did a little mini set of "Magic Power," "Lay It on the Line," and it was great. It was fun. Like
You're not really retired in your own mind. You're just retired from getting on a plane and coming to Annapolis, Maryland, and doing this, pretty much.
Well, I might do it as a one-off. I would never do it as I'm going to go to Annapolis, and then the next night we're going to play Baltimore, and then the next night we're going to play Washington, and then the next night, like I would never want to
All
tour
right, so
again.
what I need to do is get, like, when the Blue Jays are in town, figure out an Oriole thing, call my friends and Laura and those folks and say, look, he's here, he's bringing a guitar, pay him, and let's get together and like enjoy art that we're alive and you're alive and we can share this music.
Sounds like a great plan.
All right, that's it. I'm going to end it on
Wait,
that. After they buy the book.
I want to meet the catcher.
Oh, Rutschman. Oh, you need to meet Rutschman. Okay, all right.
Yeah,
I'll see what I can do with that.
That's my kind of ball player. I love the fact that at the end of every inning, no matter what, he goes over, and as the pitcher's coming off, he goes behind him and he gives him a pat on the ass or a pat on the back and walks him back to the dugout like, okay, anything you want to talk about? And I go, that's my kind of guy. That's my kind of player.
Who was your favorite all-time player? That'll tell me. I'm George Brett and Tony Gwynn. Those are my guys forever. I knew Gwynn a lot. Don't know Brett, but Brett was always my guy. Who's your guy?
Yeah. Well, I think, there's a part of me that loves the whole Lou Gehrig thing, that kind of a player that was the humble, modest, but modern players, wow, it's a tough call. The Jays have got Guerrero's a pretty good hitter, and Bichette is getting better every year. I expect him to have an amazing year this year. But I don't know. I mean, Baltimore's got a few, man. Like catcher's good, and
Henderson's going to be great. We got Jackson Holliday. You mentioned Guerrero and Bichette. Like, I remember their fathers and interviewing their fathers 30 years ago. When we have Jackson Holliday too, Matt Holliday's kid's going to be a superstar here this year. Yeah,
for sure. And Mountcastle, who's the first baseman again?
Mountcastle. Well, I mean, we got the shortstop, third base, and Gunnar Henderson's probably the name that you. Yeah.
So many guys they're the right kind of ball players. And so on my members forum, there's a lot of talk about baseball all the time.
Dude, they're 1-1s. We lost 120 games for 5 years in a row. This is what you get.
I know. I was picking Baltimore to do better in the playoffs, and I don't think they'll do better this year. But I was picking them to go all the way. I thought they had what it took, and you lost your relief guy. And that was Batista. Hard.
Yeah. They signed Kimbrel. They gave Kimbrel a lot of money. But the new ownership part here, I mean, if there's anything to glean from your book and the breakup of Triumph, it's sort of like who's running the place and how it gets run, and everybody's happiness is important. We haven't had a lot of that here. So the sunshine that I put over Camden Yards here, Rick, it's the sunshine coming over after lots of dark clouds here in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Rick,
Oh, I get
thank
it.
you for your time. And I'm
You're welcome.
very respectful. You told me, I said, you got 20 minutes? Take an hour. I'm like, I'll take an hour and didn't even make you sing. So I appreciate that, man. Thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome.
Rik Emmett, the book is Lay It on the Line. It was just a beautiful conversation, a backstage pass to Rockstar Adventure, Conflict, and Triumph, and a really good-looking young version of Rick, and then the current good-looking modern version of Rick the teacher. Good luck with the book. I hope to have you at a ball game one day over a cold Labatt's and a proper hot dog, all right?
Good, Nestor. Thank you.
Appreciate you. Rik Emmett joining us here from beautiful Toronto, our neighbors to the north. I'm Nestor. We are WNST AM 1570. Towson, Baltimore. Back for more on WNST and Baltimore Positive right after this.